So I've seen this tweet going around from user PainkillerQ8, asking the question which one of these 4 games looks the best. Then I saw a reply from Night Sky saying respectfully, this is why AAA gaming is imploding on itself. And you know what? He's right. Also, to answer the question, Horizon Forbidden West. These past few weeks have come out with videos talking about Nintendo and their place in the gaming industry today, and why they're generally doing better than PlayStation and Xbox currently. The Switch is the best-selling console this generation and the 3rd best-selling console of all time, despite being not nearly as powerful as the PS5 and Series X, and this also tied back to a 20-year-old interview with the former president of Nintendo, Satoru Iwata, in which he talked about how game development just gets harder when you're dealing with more powerful machines, which really aged well, because as we can see now with the PS5 and Series X, there's a lot wrong here. Things aren't great. Starting with the PlayStation 5, it's honestly doing well sales-wise, but still half of the PS4 user base has not upgraded to the PlayStation 5, and that can largely be attributed to the lack of exclusives. Most of the major PlayStation franchises like Horizon and God of War also released on the PlayStation 4, so there was even less of a reason to upgrade to PlayStation 5 unless you really care about better graphics. And even then, the rate that these exclusives are coming out is not nearly as fast as it used to be in previous generations. Sony even confirmed that there won't be a major PlayStation franchise released in this fiscal year, which just goes to show that they need to put more respect on Astrobot's name. And Xbox is also facing very similar issues, but also worse ones when they just shut down a few of their studios that they bought only a few years back. I'm still salty about Tango Gameworks because they had just come out with the highly successful Hi-Fi Rush, and that's also the antithesis of the games that we're going to be talking about today. The games that just chase realism to the point where they take so long to make and they are ungodly expensive. Just thinking about this also makes me look back at previous generations and how, quite frankly, we were spoiled. For example, let's look at Naughty Dog's output on the PlayStation 3. We got Uncharted, Uncharted 2, Uncharted 3, even The Last of Us. 4 games on one console. And then there's Xbox 360 with Gears of War 1, 2, 3, and Judgment. 4 games in one series on one console. Meanwhile, on PlayStation 4, their output, barring any remasters, was Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us Part 2. And with Xbox, it was Gears 4 and Gears 5. Even still, I'd consider that game output a miracle on this console generation. Now I feel like we're lucky if we even get 1 game per franchise per generation. Game development has just taken so long these days, and that has to do with a number of factors, but I think a major reason for this problem is the chasing of graphical fidelity. If you don't believe me, just listen to Xbox Studios chief Matt Booty. He said last year that both game players and the industry in general need to realize that most big games now have development cycles that take 4 to 6 years. He specifically cited higher expectations for being one of those reasons, as well as the level of fidelity that they're able to deliver. And to that, I just have to play this clip from the illustrious Dr. Ian Malcolm.
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
And that's a great point. Just because you can deliver the most realistic graphics possible or whatever, doesn't mean you actually should. I feel like at this point, there has to be compromises made. I used to think that more powerful consoles helped make game development easier, not the other way around. Even God of War director Cory Barlog said that with more powerful machines comes more work for them. And that just makes me wonder, why do we even create new consoles if the work of game developers just gets harder and harder? And now we're apparently in the latter half of these consoles' life cycles. I feel like they just started. Xbox already said they're working hard on their next console, and I'm just like, stop. Just stop. I don't know why they keep giving these developers more and more power to work with when it's clearly making their jobs harder. Also, we can see 20 more pieces of stubble on some man's face. It all comes down to diminishing returns. We're getting to a point where graphical leaps just aren't impressive anymore. It was very impressive back in the days of 2D to 3D, and the first 3 generations of 3D gaming consoles had impressive leaps between as well. But once we started getting to the PS4 and Xbox One era, that's where things started to be less astonishing. Despite all the work put into these new generation games, they honestly barely look better than the last generation. There are some exceptions, like with Hellblade 2, which is just a gorgeous game that I couldn't see running on a previous gen console, but it came out 7 years after the first game. So if it takes that long to make games as beautiful but simplistic as this, then I don't want them anymore. Take them back. And you might want to tell me that long game development times is just a reality we have to face and we should be grateful that we even have games anyway. Let me tell you why long game development times are a problem. When you spend close to 10 years on one game, that's 10 years your company is not making a whole lot of money. Instead, you're spending it all on just one project. I think a lot about Rocksteady and how long it took them to make Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and that's not working out so well for them. And when games take upwards of a decade to make and cost over hundreds of millions of dollars to create, do you really think publishers want to take creative risks from that? No, they're gonna play things safe. You're gonna see a lot of the same types of games for years to come because of the state of AAA game development. Studios don't want to spend millions of dollars in at least 5 years on something that's not a guaranteed hit. Which, thank God for the indie scene, there's a lot of great indie games that you should support. I just played Animal Well, it's fantastic. But back to my original point, AAA gaming is in dire straits because of their focus on graphical fidelity. Now, that isn't to say these aren't great games on their own. A lot of them play really well. I liked God of War Ragnarok a lot because it just played so well. But if games like this played the exact same way and didn't look as good, I don't think many people would notice in this day and age. Like, I don't think they can look bad per se, but you can make a game look good enough and most people really won't care. This is where art direction comes in, and that is 100% stronger than mere graphical fidelity. I don't care if I can't see all the strands of hair. I don't care if I see all the pores in someone's face. I don't care if you hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Except I do, please hit those buttons. If the game has great art direction, that's really all that matters. And you know what? I used to be on team graphical fidelity. I hated it when people criticized realistic games because I think that is still a valid art style, and I still somewhat agree to that. I think it's okay to get realistic games every once in a while. I just don't think every studio needs to chase the realism of a game like Red Dead Redemption 2. And like I've said in previous videos, Nintendo has figured this out. Their games don't always look that realistic, but they still look great thanks to strong art direction. And they come out with a lot more exclusive games than the competition, that's for sure, because they don't spend nearly as much time on the graphical fidelity as they do the overall gameplay. Then there was Tears of the Kingdom that took like 6 years to make because the systems in that game, whew, talk about complex. But you know the non-Nintendo company that was so close to getting this philosophy? Xbox with Hi-Fi Rush. For years, Xbox has been criticized for their lack of quality exclusives. A lot of their games were getting decent reviews, but there was nothing that really shattered the earth. And then one day they just shadow dropped this rhythm-based combat game that wound up winning the hearts of gamers and critics alike, getting nominated for and winning multiple awards, and it looks like this. Not an ounce of realism in this game. Not an ounce. It is purely a 3D cartoon. Xbox was pleased with this game's performance, and how do they reward the developers at Tango Gameworks? By shutting them down. Absolute insanity, and I just cannot wrap my head around why they would shut down Tango Gameworks after creating one of their biggest hits in almost a decade. But I guess they gotta make back the money of that Activision Blizzard acquisition somehow. But Hi-Fi Rush is a perfect example of what I think game studios need to understand. They're focused on the wrong thing here. Not to say they completely disregard gameplay, because like I said, some of these realistic games are quite fun still, but the thing is, a game with strong art direction and strong gameplay will always stand out more than something with uber realistic graphics. It goes back to Hellblade 2. That game, visual stunner. Loved looking at it the whole time I played. But man, those gameplay elements made it kind of forgettable. Now, I'm sure graphical fidelity is not the only reason why these games take so long and are so expensive to make. Sometimes the management of these game development teams are poor, so as a result they just take longer to make. But then there's also those gigantic open worlds filled with way too much stuff to do, to the point where someone like me is not going to finish it because they have far too many other responsibilities to take care of. I feel like once developers and publishers realize that they don't have to chase these insane graphics in order to make good games, then we'll start to see shorter development times, lower development budgets, and overall world peace. I'll tell you what, man, that's part of the reason why I'm picking up Astro Bot day one. It's because that game doesn't really focus too much on graphics, but the overall gameplay experience. And if we got more games like that in the AAA gaming space, then I will be a very happy camper. But that's all I got for you on this topic today. In the meantime, support the games you want to see more of. Buy shorter games, buy less realistic games. Basically, buy Astrobot and buy a lot more indie games. There's so many indie games out there, you gotta check them out.